taking it in. You can't pretend you didn't notice. Pick it apart, back to the start. I didn't know ya. Give it a chance, watching you dance. How did it feel ya? Even though you're red right now, I don't want your crown. Even if I fall apart, I wanna be like you. I wanna do what you do. Hear what you said, round in my head, making me sober. Know how it ends, you and your friends won't even notice. You had your part right from the start, nobody knew ya. Give it a chance, no I cannot. I wanna be like you. I wanna do what you do. I wanna be like you. I wanna do what you do.
Live from the grill on San Mateo, it's the Truth Podcast with the General Jack V. Hill. I'm your host, Coach B. June 23rd, 2020. Bro, can you imagine another week has just gone by?
Isn't that crazy, Coach? Time.
It almost feels like we're doing this every day.
You know what it is? When you're doing something great, it passes quick. Right?
We got a big show today. I mean, anybody out there that's listening, whether you're watching it live, whether you're watching it later, tomorrow, man, what a great show we got in store. John Chavez, the best producer in the business, in the house. And so, how'd your week go, man?
Week's been killer, Coach. You know what I mean? Just focusing on positive stuff. I think kind of what we talk about this podcast is, you know, really kind of, you know, that whole slogan says, let's make lemons into lemonade, right? And I think one of the things we got to kind of, we've gone and we've talked a lot about the things that are going on. But doing that, what solution are we going to create to get better on? And today's podcast, what I want to focus on and I want to talk about is two things, right? I'm going to take this back to the Grandmasters. Is the butterfly will never understand the caterpillar's language. And the caterpillar will never understand the butterfly's language, right? It's that whole concept I told you before is tiger don't walk with deer, right? The eagles don't hang with the chickens. And if they did and they got their wings pecked out, no longer would they be an eagle or would they be a chicken. They'd be walking that middle ground. And I think that one of our whole things is we don't want to be caught up in making our environment become us. It's what we can do within our environment and understanding what we can do to beat the odds, right? And I think one of the big things is, you know, we all like to play basketball, Coach. I mean, sports. You've been obviously a badass coach. Our guest has played basketball, myself. One of the things you learn is that you learn to use the rules to your advantage, right? You learn the rules to use it to your advantage, regardless of what we like about the rules. What we want to do is not want to cause too much, you know, limelight on us positive or more negative than positive. Obviously, if you do positive things, it's going to be good, right? You're going to be measured. So kind of really focusing on that, Coach. Was where I'm at.
It's amazing how athletics and the history of people having it. I appreciate you going, you were an athlete, our guest was an athlete, you referred to me, well, you were a coach. Nah, Coach was an athlete back in the day now. No, let's not get it wrong now. Back in the day, Coach was an athlete.
Don't get it twisted.
And so, but it correlates, it really does. And one of the things that we've all learned from it, we've all learned to how to overcome. We've all learned to how to deal with things, what we call sudden change, you know what I'm saying? And so that's the thing where we've had to deal with sudden change now in the last couple of months. And so that's the thing where the positive of what we've got in this podcast, where what we really talk about with people is sudden change.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely.
And so, how do you think people are doing? Now we're like 3 months into this, or going into the 4th month, right? March, April, May, June. Albuquerque just canceled the Balloon Fiesta, which was the #1 event.
$500 million to us.
The #1 event in the region. What could they have learned from the Truth podcast, brother? Do you agree with what they did, or they had to make a decision because hotels and everything and restaurants, had to prepare and do you think that they jumped the gun a little bit in, saying, hey, it's the end of June or middle of June, and we're going to cancel an event that happens in October?
Coach, it's a kind of a controversial thing. I think, the things that I got to say is, it's about when you're in leadership, in certain type of leadership, and when our next guest is going to talk about this, and the great thing is, there's something in the military we call intelligence, right? Intelligence brings us back the information we do to create a strike plan. The issue that we're seeing is the information that was coming in, was it true intelligence, or is it forged for an agenda, or is it just plain stupidity? We never know, right? So based on leadership, you got to make the decision based on the intelligence they give you. The sad piece is there's a philosophy I use in business and saying you should never get into a business that you don't understand 80% of it yourself, right? So let's just take harmonics, for example. If I got to go install a switch, I can install a switch. If I got to go run fiber optic, I can run the fiber optic. If I got to polish the fiber, I can polish the fiber. If I got to go rack the server, I can rack the server. So what ends up happening is if someone feeds me bullshit intelligence and says, you know what, General, this job's going to take 4 weeks to get done and it's one fiber run, I'm going to say the intelligence they gave me is bullshit. But that's when you're a subject matter expert in what your world is. And I use this example in our government. I use this example, right? A Secretary of State has no business being a Secretary of State if you've never served in the military. Zero. If you haven't been in high-level military, how can you run the military? How can you make decisions that are smart? Because people could be feeding you bullshit, and you're going to say, well, you know what? The information that was given to me is what I derived from it. And so, do I think that the Balloon Fiesta should have been canceled? No. Do I think that, in essence, when you make a decision, whether it's in war or in business, you say, how if I make this decision, catastrophically, could it affect me long-term and how big? And so when you're seeing things like canceling the Balloon Fiesta, we're already in poverty as it is in New Mexico. You're just adding to something systematically very larger than that. And, a lot of people are listening out there, you're going to get some mixed feelings, they're going to be pissed off. But ultimately, we are now trying to, who's ever watched Jurassic Park over here? Right? You watched Jurassic Park, right? Yeah. In Jurassic Park 3, when that scientist went back to that island, he says, what do you see here? And he says, I see people playing God. And he talked about the dinosaurs, says, I see people playing God. Ultimately, we're trying to mitigate an enemy that we've never seen doesn't know what it feels like, and we're saying, you know what, if we do this, we're going to mitigate all this potential disaster. But we're basing the empirical data off a country that the base average was 70 years old, right? And so it's just kind of, it's crazy. I can't really give you a definite answer because I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm not a scientist. I don't have this information. So I'm only going based on the empirical data that I got. So I would be the wrong guy being the health administrator here for the state, so I couldn't run that job. So coach, but based on what I think, if I applied the common sense principle, I would have to say that gut feeling and common sense, I think it's a bad deal, right? I think it's going to affect us larger than what we think we are. You're already seeing how people are at restaurants. You already see people when you go into the grocery store. You already see people, you don't wear a mask. I don't wear a mask going into some places. And automatically you're looked upon like you're a bad guy, right? Like you're carrying an AR-15 on your back. So I think that it's really actually programming us in a bad way. And we've lost the total thing of faith. We've lost what the ability our human bodies can do. We've lost using our minds and common sense. And that's kind of where I'm at, Coach. You know what I mean?
Let's bring you always have superstars. Let's bring another superstar in as your guest, and let's get him engaged in this conversation because I believe he's got something to say about it.
I'm going to introduce the retired Brigade General Raphael Warren, not only but a good friend of mine and a business colleague that we're doing a lot of great things that we're going to form together. And so I'm going to let him introduce himself, but it's an honor sitting here with an amazing man, period. Just downright good guy.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for the love, and I'm excited to be here. It's fun. One of the things that Jack and I agreed on, we love what we do. We love our profession. I've been in it for over 25 years, and I've worked in the IT sector.
Closer to you.
I've worked in the IT sector, for over 25 years, but I had some unique opportunities, and then I was able to look at the world of IT and cybersecurity as a federal agent. So I saw what it looked like in the criminal world. I've looked at it in industrial espionage. I've looked at it just terrorism. So I kind of got a full picture of what cybersecurity looks like and what it does. And one of the fun things working with Jack is it's not something you can add on and bolt in. You have to build these systems with all of those cybersecurity elements built in. So I was happy to team up with him as we assess companies, as we get them to really industrial grade security. I'm doing some work for some companies that are doing something for Sandia, and that's just the highest level. So Jack and I have teamed up, and we've signed with a large company. There's some things happening now. We hope to see some great things in the future. But today Jack was talking about being positive and doing some cool things. And I spent a little time on Brian Cologne's show the other day, and he asked me about the George Floyd thing, and I had to tell him that for someone like me, who as I think Drake said, I started from the bottom, now I'm here, but I'm living in a little bit of a different world. So it's my responsibility to stay connected to that world, because I'm going to get some honest answers. But that would only be to be the conduit, to get in front of the movers and shakers and people who make decisions and say, this is what my community is saying. You're here to talk to me because I have some status and you let me speak.
You also have the credibility of walking on both sides of the fence, working with the federal government, and then also, which has been a challenge in what in everything that we're doing today, working in the private sector, and also being a minority growing up in a field that kind of lacked minorities.
Absolutely. I'll never forget, I went to an event where I was to speak at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. I'm there, I'm going to be one of the speakers, so I walked up near the front of the stage and the podium, and before I could get to the coordinator, a guy says, well, no, you're supposed to be back there. And so I just went back there and sat in the back, and I noticed in that room of about 1,000 people, I looked different. And someone says, at the time, "Where's Colonel Warren?" So I raised my hand from the back of the room. They just assumed that I had nothing to offer, nothing to share.
Right. One of my dear friends in life, and we just lost him within the last 6 months, was a football coach out of Alexandria, Virginia.
Yes.
And his name was Herman Boone. And they made the movie Remember the Titans about him.
Yeah.
When the movie came out, he found himself on the speaking tour. And one of the things that he had to endure, and kind of took it on himself, he did not like it every time when he checked into a hotel. They didn't know who he was, he always ended up in the back of the hotel. And it was a pet peeve in his, how pissed he would get, how automatically he would get sent to the back of the hotel.
Yeah.
It's those little things that maybe you had to endure growing up and in creating your career. Give us a little bit of background on that.
So I'm one of 6 children. My mother, her husband died when I was about 2. So those are difficult circumstances. And statistically, I wouldn't have been given much of an opportunity to succeed. I had a great aunt who was a brilliant lady and a brilliant child psychologist. She gave me a sense of value and importance and that sort of thing. My mother was a domestic worker. And I'll never forget on an occasion just being dropped off over there, sitting on the back porch while she took care of those little white kids. And it's heartbreaking. You don't understand it. It's your mother's job, but are those children more valuable than me? She doted over. She did things that my mother didn't do for me because when she came home, she was tired.
Exhausted.
But my great aunt filled that gap, and she would look at my homework and that sort of thing, and she would read and let me read to her. And early on, got me started in academics. Later on, I got a chance to go through I was born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and the Triad area is an amazing place. They even incidentally educate poor black kids there. And I got to be in a program for the academically talented when I went to junior high, math, science, things like that. My mother had never heard of such a thing, and so she thought there was something wrong with me. And she would say, "Just do the best you can, baby." She didn't understand where I'd gotten, and so even when I went off to the military and had shown some early promise in kind of moving forward, and even after I became an officer, she would always ask me, "Did you make sergeant yet?" It's the most she could imagine for me.
Sure.
Yeah, and even when I thought to impress her years later, I showed her around all the guys that were under my command. I showed her all that stuff, and she asked me, "Well, who's your boss?" And I go, "Mother, all these people are." And she looked at me like she didn't quite believe it, But
this is the example, Ralph. What I was telling you is we started off with a caterpillar doesn't understand the butterfly's language. You see, so ultimately what we want, and I'm not going to cut you out, but what I want to talk about and we got to focus on is sometimes it's our job to not always educate that individual. Because sometimes if that's not going to understand, you're wasting their time and yours. So you know what you do? You kind of just say, you know what? You just entertain the thought. They're asking, here's the Brigadier General, I don't know if it's word the time Colonel, and obviously there's no one there except a general who's going to have to report to, but they're looking for the next thing. And this is the stuff that I went through with my mom, right, when I was a self-made multimillionaire, and she would tell me, Mr. Smith's son's a doctor, and I wanted to, laugh my fucking ass off, and I'm thinking, well, that's cute. I made $25 million. You know what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah.
But again, what you learn as you come of age is that you're just kind of working with them and saying, you know what, it's not bad being a cat. They didn't get to that level. So you got to kind of just say, I'm going to entertain the thought.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you get
and to your point, it is difficult when your mother and her philosophy is just wrong. My mother is alive now, and she's 100 years old.
God
She thought to teach me my place, how to function in the South. She thought I've been ambitious since day one, and she thought it would be best for me to tone it down and to find my place and to fit in my place. And she did it from a loving thought process, but it was wrong. it was never going to work for me. And in truth, my intensity and desire could have gotten me killed in the races south. It was just that bad. But I made it out. I left when I was 17 years old. Went off to the military. I tried to play a little baseball. I didn't have as much talent as they needed to make to the big times. But coming here to New Mexico and just kind of starting life over, I had. I want to leave everyone with my little special word today. So I'm going to do my little decidedly unsophisticated poetry, and it's about my special little word, and we'll talk more about it as we go on. And so here it is. I have a word, though in truth it's a phrase. I've used its power myself on many dark days. When your journey gets rough and you feel a bit lost, this magic phrase is priceless, yet it has no cost. It can't be counterfeited or stolen away. When you find it, that will be your best day. The pieces of the life puzzle will fit, I bet you, when you find your own raison d'etre. So that word, that phrase, raison d'etre, it is your reason to live. Your reason you're on this planet. Your thing, your jam is what you do. And you find it, you pour love into it. You find that it will keep you warm on emotionally cold days. It will keep you moving forward because you have a sense of purpose, meaning. And when I got that opportunity in the military to be a leader, to reach out and see guys that I call knuckleheads, to help them, to teach them, train them, to give them more time and effort than anyone before. Lots of dropouts and emotionally orphaned children in the military lost. And I'm just like them. And I got out, and they can too. And I've learned over the years that I can teach them anything except for maybe where babies come from. I've not been able to teach a lot of young males. That concept escapes them. But I've had this glorious opportunity. I will never forget when I was in basic training and they had mail call, and you stand up there and they would call people's names, and I knew my name wasn't going to be called. And it would hurt me because why am I different? Why doesn't anyone care? And I would kind of, get to the back of the formation. I noticed other guys like me. But then I would notice some guys. On cold days, it will keep you moving for me because I would get something every day. And when the days they didn't get anything, they would almost fall apart. I learned there's a bit of life that you have to navigate all by yourself. And the sooner you learn that, the sooner you start charting your own course, the better it's going to be. It's good to have emotional support. It's a great thing, and kids need that. But I would tell every kid, you've got to find your own path. You've got to find your raison d'etre. And that thought process has helped me. I have over 100 plus combat missions. So I hold the traditional badges that the Army would look to as elite, air assault, airborne, senior aircrew, combat action. Combat action is held for someone who has actual combat engagement. But not just managing it, you're managing other people's lives in combat. You could go over 10 times what you're supposed to do when that happens. And the radio lights up and they'll say, taking fire. I say, element 2, hold position. Element 3, roll around, keep going. They need to hear my voice. And I need to be that guy who's so focused on them and their lives that I don't have time to fear for my own. Right. Don't get me wrong. You have fears in combat, but if you love your soldiers, you love what you do, you pour your heart into that, and you forget about the rest.
My nephew in Oklahoma, Chad King, is listening to you right now. He's a former military. Before we get into the X's and O's, let's go back and let's go over your decorated career. So that's why who's listening understands that how honored we are to have you here, and and so on and so forth. So you're a young kid growing up in Chapel Hill.
Yeah. You
go into your high school years. What was your mindset when you were in high school? Did you think about a career in service? You said you wanted to do baseball? You were?
Yeah. I was pretty good at that. I got a chance to go down to a minor league camp and really get a true assessment of the skills and talents I did not have. So I had the most painful scenario, which is being close enough and good enough to have a bit of hope that you could do it. You know, some guys give up on that fairly early, but the military was going to give me a way out, and all I wanted since my earliest thought, how do I get out of here and go on to the world and find where I fit in it? And so I went to the Air Force first. I came to Kirtland Air Force Base, and that environment was good for me. I was honor graduate out of my helicopter mechanic school. Then I went down to the Education Center when I met an African American guy who was a counselor. And that's another point when you see that friendly face and have that conversation. And I say, well, I want to go to college. He said, for what? I don't know. And he says, well, we're going to take some tests and find out where you fit. And I said, where are you from? I said, from Chapel Hill. He says, I know about that area. And so he had me take these CLEP tests. And before I knew it, he had gotten me almost to a 2-year degree because he said, I know what you can do. I didn't know what I could do. So you take these college level tests, and you take these tests, and I got into the math and sciences and then aeronautical career. And then I got out of the military and worked for GE Aircraft Engines. And that was great. Went back, got a master's degree in computer science and information technology. And I got a bunch of certifications in systems engineering and Cisco engineering certifications. And young guys ask me all the time, so which should I do? Should I get these certifications or should I get the degree? And I said, my thought is do it all. Do all that you can do. Let's just let that be the standard. Do as much as you can do. But even then, I will never forget probably my darkest day in joining the New Mexico National Guard and doing well, and thinking things are fine. But when it really got to the point, and that's from major to lieutenant colonel, that's the guys that the world's going to change for you dramatically. Lots of guys are going to get out at captain and major. They rated all the officers, 15 or 20 of us, and they had me at the bottom, absolutely the bottom. And it was supposed to be a big secret, but I found out about it like everyone does, and I was so hurt, so shaken by it, because I'd never been rated like that in a long time. I'd done well and things were going along. I had good grades. And there are metrics. There's a physical fitness test from 180 to 300. I had a 300. The discriminators like degrees. I had a master's degree already. And my placement in my officer candidate school was at the top of the class. And yet they rated me at the bottom. I was devastated about that for a moment. But the military has a way of working through things. Someone challenged that board because other people thought it was unfair. Well, they did it again, and then I came out like about middle of the pack, and still it was challenged. And so once you can't do it in the state, it goes to the national arena. I went there, and I was one of the few in the nation. I got promoted. It was the sweetest victory. From that low, it was the sweetest victory. When the numbers and what you did and all that thing really starts to speak for you.
It just goes back to my testament. It was butterflies judging the ability of a butterfly. Right, this is the shit that I deal with all the time. You know, when Rafael came, one of the breath of fresh airs for me is, if you guys know that I'm not in this for the money anymore. I mean, that's fucking obvious. Right? And when Rafael came into my camp, he had actually gone and he measured a lot of companies. Right? He's smart. He just gave you what it is. And that's one of the cool things. I think when he hadn't met me, he had met one of our salespeople, and I think he comes in and this is, I looked and said, you know what? This might be a small shop. I don't know what it's about. You know where it's at. But based on performance, he walked out there blown away and coming back and saying, I kind of want you to share that. I don't want to toot my own horn,
yeah. But
Rafael then walked away and says, holy shit, you're at a national level. Because I knew the ability, and my whole thing is we're like special forces, you know, the elite. There is no whatever, and all kinds of different facets. And my whole goal was, I'm looking at a guy, a veteran, ranking at a very high level, and I'm like, he's going into the business world, and I'm saying, Rafael, it's going to be tough for you, but it wasn't because his mindset's there like a butterfly, or ego to ego. I says, now I'm going to be the trainer, you know, and I'm going to show you this. And you're going to have to step back and let me teach you this stuff. Because business is combat. But what's so brutal about it, too, it's pretty similar to combat because if you make a very bad mistake, you won't come back. and it could cost you a future of devastation. Future of devastation, right?
Sure.
And so, kind of talk a little about that.
Yeah, the thing. I had, so I was the director of IT for the Mexican National Guard. So I had hired and used some of these teams and companies, and I had an idea of the lay of the land. Not to mention I spent a period as intelligence officer. So doing that sort of assessment, and there were some bigger companies, and some of them had what looked like a bigger, nicer building. Not easily impressed with those sort of things. And so I was kind of ho-hum about it. You know, so I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go out and consult, because my big advantage is helping people prepare themselves to go and do government contract, because I sat on the other side of that. I know what you need to say, do, and how your paperwork needs to look to be able to do government contracts. So when I met Jack, and just the fact that he was truly strong in his knowledge, that's just the first thing. There are lots of people playing lip service and repeating words and have sales pitch, but deep knowledge. And I need that. If I'm going to learn something from someone, they need to know. See, in the military, we have this standard where when a guy becomes an expert, I don't care what rank you are, if I send you to training for a guy with 3 stripes and he's an expert on that weapon, you're to sit there and learn. And that's one thing you teach your young officers. And that guy's a pro, you go and you get coached. You learn how to be coached. And you never lose that. So every step of the way, we go up to different levels. You go back to a training, get more coaching. You go back to training, you get more coaching. And so I met this guy, and this is the way I like to refer to Jack, is because we've been out on some presentations together. I have a Jurassic Park reference also. You remember when they got to the point that they didn't know, they had one thing left, and that was that Tyrannosaurus in that cage, the T-Rex in the cage. You know, so Jack is where you say, is this time to let Jack out? You know, but I said the same thing. But this is who I needed to work with and partner with, and it's been excellent. I mean, I will tell you, a big company, $1 billion company came in, and because I had certain credentials, they came to me and says, we want to sign you to our contract because you're going to help us get this bigger contract. And I says, I've got somebody I work with, and I'm going to give you a few names. Even though I gave them multiple names, he still won. He still came out on the top. I mean, I had to give them some additional names. He still came out, and this is that thing where this is a company. They don't know him here. They don't know who works here.
Right.
But they got a chance.
I really, when I met Jack, you know, never did it ever come to me. You know, I know him now for about 5 years. Never did it come to me like, who is this guy? You know, because he starts talking really strong right off the bat. He's who he is. He doesn't put on any airs. He doesn't talk. Never once did I went, who is this guy? Like, who is this? You know, because he was genuine.
Right.
You know? And so, and he brings in genuine people. And you, Raphael, the reason why I really want to delve into you a little back live. Are we on the same feed, or we got a different feed?
No, it's same TV. We should be back.
And we're back. We're back.
They flashed us. We're back now.
We're back now, baby.
You know, one of the things that we talk about, there is a lot of energy on that side of the bar, John. So you better kick it up, buddy. Because we got too much energy on that side. We got to give some back. You know, as we were talking about you being an agent of change. You know, the heights that you've reached, the decorated career that you've had. Thank you for your service, number one, first and foremost. If we had to say what was the key, or what is the key to your success as the role model that you are, as the agent of change that you are?
I always like to tell young guys that courage and motivation. Courage and motivation, you put those two things together, and that guy who might be a bit smarter than you, a bit faster than you, a little better technique than you, he cannot get past your motivation. It is the key. If you're in the game, you're good enough to get in the game. Sure, there are limits to people. Let's assume that you're in the game and you got a shot. You got into that college, or you got into that company. So you got a shot. You're in the game. Courage and motivation can take you a long ways. The other thing, seek coaching, seek mentoring. And that
Be
whole
coachable.
Be coachable. Be coachable. Be willing to just let go of what you think you know, let go of what you believe you are, and let someone assess you. Take that honest assessment. Jack was telling me all kind of wrong-headed thoughts when I met him, and you know, this is why we're still going.
Right.
Because I wanted to hear more. Now, see, that's the difference. Some people, the minute you start telling them that there's something wrong, they shut down. Winners will open their ears up. They'll listen more intently. They'll want to spend more time talking about it.
When you talk about that, men of success, they have ego.
Yes.
For you to rise, we know, Jack, for you guys to accomplish what you've had to accomplish, you couldn't do it without ego.
Gotta have it.
What do you define as ego, and how do you keep that in check? Or do you have to keep it in check? You can kick in too, bro, because
I'm gonna step in on this one. So I'm gonna disagree with you guys on ego, okay? So you guys know, I got 2 black belts, and so I'm gonna tell you something about martial arts. Ego is something that you form in your mind, and you constantly have to feed it. So you said you got to keep it on or off. So it's like a light switch. When you really study, like one of the things I saw with Bruce Lee, he told me to watch that show, right? And I watched it. And so my teachings, what I teach, come more from an Eastern philosophy. Now I'm going to give you the example.
be water.
Be water, right? And you look at Bruce Lee and what he was teaching when he showed the crane. I was showing you guys. If you practice something over and 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 over again, it becomes like breathing. So you don't sit here and tell your heart, pump, beat so many times, breathe. So when you have to constantly be building something, you'll never be a master. And that's what Bruce Lee was talking about when he says, fear the man who has done one punch 10,000 times than the man who's done 10,000 different styles. And that's what he was talking about, the Wing Chun, where he was like, everything was derived from Wing Chun. And he was showing you that style. Well, and over again, I don't gotta think about it. It becomes a reaction. It becomes natural. So my belief is that I believe ego is edging God out of your life, so I don't have any ego. I believe to practice all the time so that it's just second nature to who I am. So you don't teach a crocodile how to strike when it comes out of the water. It's natural. So us as humans, if we just stay still and we look at our environment and we look at certain things that Raphael brings, stuff that the Winston brings, John, yourself, what I do is I say, holy shit, what do I want to mimic from this guy? What do I see their deals? And so ultimately, if you find something that's very important to you or that brings value, practice it over and over and over and over again. And if it brings that value to you, you're gonna be able to measurable. So there's a measurable to it. Ego can't be measured. There's no measurable. They've studied this at Yale. They had this big study on it. So my whole philosophy is this: when you watch guys like MJ, right? When you watch guys like Bruce Lee, when you watch even guys like LeBron, when LeBron was in that playing against in that last, not the last, but one of his series where they were down, NBA history said no one has ever come back from that deficit, and the team had just given up. He just stepped into what he knows best, being LeBron, and he made history coming from a deficit to win the championship. What you gotta understand is that you never worry about the status quo and never measure yourself off people's opinions, and definitely don't measure off of people's measurables. So if I'm looking in here at John, I'm sitting with him, we're gonna talk history. He's gonna teach me because he's actually has more proven information about the stuff that we're talking about that I do. So what he's doing is I'm going to a source that's gonna be able to validate what I'm saying. So if he shakes his head no, this means the shit that I said is all full of shit. So I'm gonna be like, okay, I gotta change it up. So can you help me go down that path? When I sat with Raphael, he's a badass leader. But when he came down, I said, you know what, you're not a badass CEO right now. And I'm gonna teach you how to be a badass CEO, because the way I measure it is how much money you're gonna make and what are your goals, period. There's nothing else to it, right? Carson, when he sat with me and he's like, okay, I wanna get to these goals, and we're in there and we're digging holes. Well, you think, well, what the fuck is the general having me digging holes? Where are we gonna go with this, right? He never questioned it. What I was trying to see with him is, how far was it gonna take me so that I could break him physically? I wanted to see what his limitation physically was. Because if I know where you are physically, then I know where your mind is, because I've always told you, the body follows the mind. So in that last rep, is it really the body failing? Because I don't give a shit. If you take your body to failure and your mind says throw one fucking rep up, you're gonna crush your chest. So what those athletes are saying is, it's not that they were beating the body, they actually exceeded the mind's limitation.
What you're talking about is a discipline. It's that discipline that you've learned. You know, the discipline that the examples of you learn. Where, Raphael, do you feel, or in your definition, is ego?
Well, I'm going to cop to having some ego, and you can ego, vanity, pride.
Yeah.
It's definitely there's a reason that there are some things enumerated as deadly sins. Okay, there's a reason for that, because you need to believe, you have to have faith and hope and all that stuff, but you sometimes got to get real. And that's the kind of thing that says, of all of my talents that I could bask in, what is it I don't have, and where do I need to go to learn it? And that was the thing that drew me. Plus, you mentioned it, energy. Energy is an important thing, and energy is contagious. You know, there are people you will talk to that will drain your batteries in 5 minutes talking to them.
No doubt.
And there are people, you can talk to them for hours. You know what, Jack and I, we'll get loud in the room.
Yeah.
We'll get loud because the energy's flowing, and the body is just taking that energy up, and our voices go up. And Jack says, Rafi, and then we're just going.
No doubt. You have to believe so mightily in yourself. Who knows this better than you, Raphael? You have to believe so mightily when you're in combat and you're in charge of lives. And your split-second decisions save lives or cost lives, correct?
Yes, and I want to speak to that. I had a guy the other day, and he was, we were talking about that, and I said, war is a horrible thing, And it taxes the mind to think in the most benevolent term and be ready to do something really horrible. Because you have to be ready to do something horrible because the enemy is ready to do something horrible. It is that lump in the throat, pit of the stomach, the sound of your heart beating and your bowels moving, where you're trying to know what to do in the moment. And the other terrible thing, now when you're a leader and you get it right, you have so much love for the guys that you're leading and so much dedication to it, self becomes less important. And you rise and you elevate. I heard it was a bit of pop psychology, but Pitbull said on his show, he says, fear. You can face everything and run, or you can face everything and rise. And you want to be in that moment where when your heart's in the right place and you're there to try to do the best you can to help you and your men survive that mission, there's a clarity. There's a clarity that comes over you. And it's an eerie, satisfying feeling when you let go of self. And you really, really, really are looking at those guys. And I used to have a little drill because I worked small team. I was assigned with 20th Group Special Operations Forces, and we were embedded training Afghans. We lived in the village with them. So it not have a big base to protect me. So it was a force of who you are will make them decide if they want to try to take you or not.
Yeah.
They'd have that thought process in their head. They just need to understand when they engage with you that something that tells them not to take that, not to try that guy. And you can gain respect from people who don't like you.
Yep.
You can get respect from people who would rather you not be in their country. But
What are some of these pictures that we're looking at right now?
okay, so this picture right here is dear to me, and if you can see it closely, that the young lady standing up has a honey bun in her hand, and you find little things that you can build on. And I said, I'm going to make sure these little girls are okay. It was one of the villages that I would patrol, and I always have an interpreter with me, and I'll say something, he'll say it. They teach you how to handle an interpreter because, as you know, there's a lot of communication that's nonverbal. So my interpreter is on my left, off my shoulder, and I'm saying things to these children, and he's saying it. And one of the things I told them, we played a little game. They're only supposed to come out when they hear my voice. And we played a little game, they get a little prize. So when you're patrolling all these villages, you don't have time to keep track of everything. Something bad went down in that village, and we were trying to get back to that zone to deal with it. And we were back there, and we got the other guys out, and I couldn't find those little girls. And I'll tell you, my guys was like, sir, don't go on that. So I broke protocol, and I ran too far into the area just to call them. And they came out because we played that game for them to hide until I told them to come out. And they just hid. I taught them that. And just those little things like that, because you're just trying to hold on to some of your humanity. And I want to clear, there are things I've done in combat that I'm not proud of. And it makes you have almost out-of-body experiences. There's a friend of mine that's no longer here. And I think of him. Because war follows you back. And it creeps into your sleep. It creeps into your day, it creeps into your psyche, steals your joy and peace. He was a mechanic, and he was a good man, but I don't think he ever processed that part of war. He worked on military vehicles, but it all seemed kind of separated to him. And he had a tough time in combat. And I thought I had the illusion, if not delusion, that we'd gotten out of it. Because I knew he was having a tough time. He came back, and he started drinking a lot. We got him in the rehab program, and I ran into him one day, and he was out. I said, he'd gotten off of base, walked off base up to the Golden Corral. I go, X, what are you doing here? He said, I didn't like the food. I go, you have to stay at the program. Promise me you'll stay. Oh, sir, I'll stay in the program. So he gets out of the program. I see him a couple of months later in Santa Fe and I go to give him a hug, and he smelled like
just open bottle of bourbon. And if I don't care, so here's a tip. If any of your friends in the middle of the day smell like a booze bottle, they have a problem.
Yep.
Self-medicated.
I said, you stay here, and I'm going to come back and get you.
He was in pain.
He was in pain. I'm going to come back and get you. And he's a high-ranking sergeant. He was a E8. He's going to have a good life. That's a good retirement. It's a successful enlisted career. You take care of your family and all that kind of stuff. And I hugged him and left, and I came back and I couldn't find him. And he killed himself that night. And it felt like he slipped through my hands. So that's those things that you get from combat. I think one of the things that made it easier for me is that I was able to control some of my life and make decisions and that sort of things. When you come back, you're having some success.
I think one of the things we talk about, Raf, is, like kind of setting those small goals internally and externally. You were able, your environment, and even my environments that we've been subjected to, we were able to dance with our demons, not subdue to them.
The discipline.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? I think
Yeah, you do. Am I right? I don't have those experiences that you guys have. Is it the discipline that helps you day to day?
It's what he was saying. Raf's saying it's like the hope. It's like knowing what light is, right? No matter what darkness is, you know what the light is. And so if you ever, I tell people this story, when you just get, if you've never had an ice maker, like we didn't have an ice maker when I was a kid, and someone gives you that glass and they put ice in it, and you get that water, and you're like, holy shit, this water is like, that glimpse of that ice maker, right? You fucking go out into the field, and whether you're in Afghanistan or you're in the jungle or bullshit, and you're eating the shitty water, if you think hard enough, you could kind of say, this water tastes like this, or one day I hope to get to that. So I think one of the things that you hold on to in anything is the good times in life. And so what Rafael was saying earlier, and I've had a lot of guys that I know that, we buried a lot of soldiers, and it was because they couldn't let go. It's like in the moment. And so I tell people this, right? It's not a fucking surprise that I'm not, I'm a Christian individual, but I tell people I'm Christian, but I have my Buddhist ways. And when they say that is that I live in the present and I make the present the best I possibly can. So therefore my future's forged and my past is made.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that when you find the humanity and the stuff like what Ralph was saying is, he's in there, he could have been a tyrant. We know there's a lot of tyrant soldiers, we know that. But it's our goal to say, dude, you fucking pull that shit out, we're going to have a problem with you, right? We're going to handle you. Yeah. And I think what ends up happening is that you can't be a bunch of followers. I'm going to tell you a funny story. I had a lot of piece of shit friends in my life, when I was coming up as a young man, as soldiers and just friends in general. So I'm trying, in 1996 when I was in boot camp, our whole platoon was the first huge investigative platoon in history, because we was the first platoon where females were allowed. And they came in and they were treated like shit. Major shit, right? And I found myself multiple times protecting them. So I couldn't take a protection like, I'm protecting like this. So I remember they couldn't hold up and they'd be in push-up position. I'd be like, drop when I whistle, get up. And then when someone stepped in, I'd say, you run your mouth, I'm gonna catch you in the shower and break your face. Everybody knew I was a boxer, right? So they kind of kept it. I wasn't too interpersonal, but I knew what right from wrong was. The crazy part is I found myself one time, we're going off to AIT, and I kind of felt like, my heart wasn't there, and I couldn't find a church. I'm trying to find a church. And I always remember this girl named Weir, and she comes in, and there's these African American females, and they show me such love and says, well, why don't you come with us to our church? Because where the Catholic church was lay across the base, so I couldn't get there. I only had a certain amount of time to get back. And I remember sitting with them, right, and it was like my heart. She could sing like a songbird. I'm talking just amazing. So you create that battle buddy, but you create that unit. So now they're my family. It doesn't matter to me, right? And so what you tend to learn is that you hold on to those moments. So anytime I ever felt in that time like a moment of despair, I would focus on this girl's song that I heard and stuck in my head. Yeah. I think in life, we tend not to focus on those great small things we have in life because we're looking for something bigger. But if we just focus on those small things right now, when we do get to the bigger things, they're gonna taste that much better. That's why you have to go through the journey of success, right? You see guys like me and Raph, right? You would never know, like, you would never be like, those guys are gonna get rough on us. They're gonna be like, we're the nicest guys, we're gonna be there. But you would get a bad awakening
Yeah.
if you decide to awoke the lion, right? And that's what true power is. And this is what I was talking about, being positive today. I sent John a video on Facebook, and it's because my frequency's tuned to a lot of bullshit. So now, for some reason, social media's giving me all kinds of bullshit. Then I see this instance that happens in Mesa, Arizona, and this cop pulls out these two white people, not bad, from the hotel room, and he's literally pointing at him. What in my world would be an M16, right? It's an AR, but I'm looking at an M16. This is bringing my vision. And he has him down. The guy says, we're coming back here. He said, get on your knees, put your hands. He complies. He says, if you make one move, I'm gonna shoot you. And the guy's like, don't shoot me, don't shoot me. And he says, put your right leg over your left, and I want you to crawl towards me. That's almost impossible. He puts his hand down, raises him. The son of a bitch raises 3 shots in a row and kills this individual. Center mass. In that moment, when I saw that, I literally had a fantasy. I fantasized in my mind. I thought I would love to find this son of a bitch and gut him like a fish. Teach him, like, not with the gun, teach him what it is to feel.
How old was this?
This
2007.
2000, but it brought such anger to me.
In Mesa, Arizona.
Like, it brought an anger to me that I couldn't even, and it's crazy, it's because, we kind of have our little group here, and I sent it to 4 trusted people, right? And it's happened to be John had to be one of them, because I have a certain, it's weird, I have a certain connection, and we want to spend a lot of time together, but I sent it to him. But the reason I sent it to him is because I'm like, I cannot believe this kind of bullshit. So let me tell you where I went from there. So I'm just angered now, Coach. I'm like, we need to create a team of freaking assassins. All right? And that's how angry I am.
Did you see what I sent you back?
No, I didn't look at it yet.
But to add to the anger is that Mesa just recently
Yes.
hired him
Yes.
so that he could get his pension.
Yes,
He took him out.
yes, yes.
Yeah. And he got away with murder.
Murder.
And he tormented this guy for like 2-3 minutes of, okay, put your hands up, okay, interlace them behind your head, and literally it was like the worst game of Simon Says, which ended up with 5 bullets in his chest.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's and the guy was acquitted. Because all it takes is one person to say you're not guilty. But now they're of course the taxpayers are facing all these lawsuits because of it, because of this immunity clause that police officers are given, that they can do things without it. You know, imagine nothing else functions that way.
No,
where
I
you
couldn't even do
don't
that.
have a responsibility.
I couldn't operate that way in the military. And so there were times that I had to move people in and out of villages. And you always get someone who is going to walk slow, look at you, and I train my guys. Let him walk slow. Let him evil eye you. It's not a big deal. We can't shoot. The practical side is we can't kill all the people in the village.
No.
The other thing is, why do we want to create that sort of unrest and mess? But Coach, you said something about discipline, and discipline is also a habit. If you have a habit of pushing one more rep, going one more mile, that's what you do.
Or being an asshole.
No, you can push the human body until you die.
Yeah.
Okay, you know that if you can still stand and talk and breathe, you got another rep, you got another mile. And so the mind, you're right, the mind is the key. And if you discipline it to keep going, to keep trying, to keep practicing, I had a boatload of insecurities. I'll tell you one of them. I had a job with the Comcast Cable, so I did the networking thing here. They came up with some new technology for geeks out there, quaternary amplitude modulation and quad-shift phase shift keying technologies.
I couldn't even say that.
So I was going to go in place of one of the VPs to a golf tournament out in Phoenix. I didn't know how to golf because little black boys didn't go across the golf courses in North Carolina. You stayed away from those places. You didn't go over there unless you wanted trouble. If you weren't caddying, don't walk across it even. And I was so
frightened by that notion of, I thought I fit into this corporate model, but now here's something that I don't know how to do at all. So I got a coach, and I said, look, all I want to do is just not embarrass myself, and I just need some training. And the guy was wonderful, and I said, I just never did this, and I know I hear these white guys that have been golfing all these years. I'm from North Carolina. If you told me you just learned basketball, you got no chance against me. But golfing, he says, no, golf is not quite the same thing. So I will never forget getting out there at Phoenix, and I said, well, tell me what to ask for. And he said, well, the clubs, Ping or Callaway, and I was going in a VP's place. I went out there, and it was a country club thing, and I stayed in. So this will be new to some of your guests here. I stayed in this boutique hotel, and it's not really a hotel. It's a mansion that you can't just go get. If you know someone, and you stay in this mansion. It's a boutique hotel. I never went to one because you can't just look it up and go. you have to be there for a reason. So I said, all I want to do is be able to get the ball off the tee and hit it. And so I'm going to focus on that. I spent 4 weeks practicing like it was my job. I spent 4 weeks practicing like it was my job. And I got so good at just getting it off the tee, he said, well, I'll teach you a few other things. And the minute I had 2 or 3, the wheels come off. That's the thing about golf. You get one thing, you got that down, yeah, and you start thinking.
What do you think you got?
That's right, because I had gotten from thinking to auto, and then I start open club face, closed club face, high slide. But I got there, still nervous, and sure enough, I'm there with wealthy, only white guys. And I was hedging. I said, well, I really don't play this game that much. And they go, oh, here we got a ringer. That's what ringer. They thought I was a ringer. They thought I was kidding.
Not your hustle.
And so I got the ball on the tee off, and it just went so beautifully. He goes, there you go, that's a ringer. And it didn't matter what else I did. And I didn't know about golf, and people can play it for years and never get any better at it. So I didn't know that. So once I started looking around like, well, they're no better at it than I am. But I had all this insecurity inside of me that no one knew, but it's always these pockets of things that you're afraid of. It took me, I would say it was on par to my first combat tour. I was that afraid. I didn't want to be embarrassed. I didn't want to be that black guy that doesn't belong, and you just know, you never know where these things come from.
But you use it to fuel you. And that's the beautiful thing. And this is what I'm trying to say, look, guys. We know the world's a shithole, period. There's a lot of shithole out there. But if we just watch the animal kingdom, and I'm going to tell you this, right? If you watch a wildebeest, and when they go in herds, when they see a herd of hyenas, they don't jump out there. They can see a pack of lions and they move because lions still kind of abide by a certain type of law. They say hyenas will eat their own, right? That's why they eat in general. And I think one of the things what Raphael is saying is that what you got to do is you learn how to mitigate certain things. Like when I was growing up in northern New Mexico and stuff, I thought, well, you know what? I'm not traveling down to the south, to the middle of the city. I'm sticking to where I am. I'll become a powerhouse till I'm a big enough animal to be able to get out there. And I think a lot of people swim against the grade, right? And so you don't ever want to get into a situation where you know where the police are bad, and you say, well, that's not going to happen to me. And then you become a victim.
Yeah.
And so never become a victim of stupidity. Now, if you get hit with the one time that you get hit by lightning walking, well, you can't do that. But it's always making a decision where you don't get hit by stupidity, right? And so I've always learned, like, you know what? I'm not those people that's just going to go against chance and be like, well, I'm going to go here where you're not wanted. So the whole philosophy for me is don't eat where you're not wanted. So people live by that rule. And I like what Bruce Lee did, right? Bruce Lee, and I wish I knew this, but that movie confirmed it. Kung Fu was set out to be for him. And then the execs at Hollywood didn't think, we're not ready for the yellow man, they called it, to come in and take this lead role. Even though he's a badass, and that's why he went back to Hong Kong. But I like what Bruce Lee stood for. He would never play a part that made his people look bad. With the shaved head, the big buck teeth, the stuff he talked about, he showed the pride. And then what he showed is he was teaching people of influence, the James Deans, or I can't remember who those actors were, but they were big time actors. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he saw. And I liked one thing that he showed, he said. And he said, what I like, and this kind of ties back to Black Lives Matters, he says, our friends in the black community are the only ones, and I'm going to give it the general swag. Okay, it's not what he said exactly, but again, are the only ones that have the balls to stand up. The rest of us, we're just here, we don't want to be heard, we don't want to be seen, we're going to serve so we don't become the target. The problem is this, like I told people, what's amazing, there's just too many famous people in the black community that are pushing for the rest of the minorities, and that's why you got to get behind the action, because at the end of the day, they have the voice. And so if the Hispanic community had the voice, if the Native Americans had the voice, we could step out there. We don't have enough famous people. That's what the media. And so when you control the media, you control the minds. And that's what's crazy about this. And that's why I have so much respect for LeBron James. That he doesn't have to do anything. No one cares. No one's going to pull a gun on him, because he's that much of a powerhouse that they can oversee that. But he's out there louder than hell saying, this is not right. I got to stand for this, right?
So, two things I wanted to share one, because I know somewhere out there, if someone will listen, they'll talk about fears and anxieties, and my point to the last one, just how silly that fear was, right? But it was real to me at the time. Another one, so I'm from North Carolina, and, I've been eating seafood my whole life, and back then it wasn't any big deal. If you're brave enough, no one told you couldn't go out in the ocean and catch fish and sell it. So there were different markets, and I wasn't exposed to the good market. I knew only the market at the end of the day when the ice started to melt. Now, if you're expert, you can pick fish, but it starts to get dangerous picking fish when the ice melts. It gets a bit dangerous. So all I ever knew was black people would show up, and they'd pay some small amount, and someone would dump a bunch of fish. So I thought it was just for poor people. So when I left home, I was embarrassed to eat seafood because I thought it would show that you're poor.
Yeah.
I just didn't know any better, and I would sit in sometimes a restaurant and I'd want some seafood, and I didn't want to be identified with poor people. That's just how I saw the world. Maybe there's something in New Mexico.
No, it's the same thing. I mean, it's a lot of people that that are from New Mexico and they're afraid to order Mexican food, and it's just certain things, right? And so what's a sad piece about it, it's like what you actually put into your mind. We got the Winston, he hasn't said some words, and what you've heard, Carson, I want you to give us an input. I mean, you're from that generation now. I mean, we got that step. What do you hear from this, and what do you take from this?
The big thing that's stepping out to me is a lot of the mental things that you guys were talking about, and I was just kind of taking everything in and getting different perspectives. That's a big thing I like to do, but just the mental aspect is the biggest thing that stands out to me, and I believe 100% is that like you guys were talking about, the body failing but the mind not doing so. Same thing like Will Smith said. He said, if you put me on a treadmill, I'm going to beat someone unless I'm going to die. You know what I mean? Because it's the mental strength. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I'm grasping onto right now and listening to your guys' discussion. Yeah.
I heard. I forget. It might have been Norman Vincent Peale. I've got a story about a happenstance. I was walking through a mall, and the guy was selling success and motivation books, and it was the kind of crowd that you might suspect. There was just a few guys, but there were mostly middle-aged women who were overweight, and they were looking for a way forward. And so I stopped and I saw the titles of Norman Vincent Peale, Og Mandino, and all those Zig Ziglar and all those guys. And so the one lady who was eating ice cream at the time, she said, "Well, you look pretty slim. I guess you don't have to worry about." She said, "What do you think about these books?" I said, "Well, I read all the top 10 of those books." And so, which one do you recommend? I said, "You're talking about changing your life? Read them all." And the guy who was selling them heard me. He heard me say that, and she says, "Look, I wanted, I was a major at the time, and I told him about where I came from and all that kind of stuff, and in which books." I said, "That box set there, I think it was like a couple of bucks a book." And I said, "I would buy them all." And over half of those ladies just bought all the books. You're talking about changing your life? You don't like how it was? You don't like the pain? I mean, being a failure is very painful. And so is being a success. But there's light on the other side. If it's going to suck and it's going to hurt, make sure it's worth it. And life has pains, but make that pain worth it. Put the effort in. And maybe you'll inspire someone.
Not to cut you off, right? But, touching on that piece, think about this, right? We talk about what I said, what you put in your 20s defines you in your 30s. And then when you get to your 40s, you better start climbing the hill down the street, right? And I think one of the things is like, we look at this and we're talking about this, me and Carson, all the time. And, you know, I was a tremendous bodybuilder in my 20s, right? And I put that time and effort into it and the ass kickings and stuff. And now when I want to get into shape and do some stuff, I do some tweaks, but it's all there. It's like a savings account, right? I don't have to do too much. And you know, we're laughing one day when he says, well, son of a bitch, the general can eat a fucking dozen donuts and he's, you know, at a certain stick at a certain weight. But the thing is that the work was already done. It's like compounded interest, right? It's like now when I go out and I say, oh, I'm going to buy a supercar, or I don't give a damn, I buy the car, it's not going to affect the bank account because the bank account's already big. So those are those decisions that, like what Raf is talking about, do something that's going to benefit you in the future, that's benefiting you obviously in the meantime, in that present, but what's going to take you in the future. And so like, it's really simple, right? Successful people, what do? They get up, they meditate, they either go for a walk, they do some workout, they eat good healthy food, they're at the office. So when I'm always talking to these millennials and they're like, you know what? Well, I'm not even saying millennials, just a lot of fucking people in general. You know, I'm a night person. I work at night and then I just, I leave till 7, 10, 11, 12. And I always laugh and think about this. If we say where the mecca of finance is in the world, it'd have to be New York, right? So if we get up at 8 o'clock, it's already 10 o'clock there. So we've lost 2 hours of potential finance knowledge, right? If you're just talking based on that. So if I'm a night person and everything closed and I'm putting these strategies together, well, I'm already missing the financial knowledge by 2 hours every day. So if you really were into that world and you don't understand your environment, well, if you know that that opens up at 8 o'clock in New York, well, you better be up at 5 o'clock in New Mexico. You see the rules of engagement I'm talking about? And I think that's one of the things is we don't focus on understanding the game that we're in and what the long-term play is, right? I was talking to Raf one day, we were talking about, you know, we didn't like to play ball, and he says, you know, I'm picking up little things, I can't jump the way I do. And this guy has some tremendous runs. He'll tell you the ability, like even in the National Guard and stuff. I had a PT patch, but this guy blew the doors off, right? And so like what he was able to do in his age group, you're like, fuck, most people can't do it in their 20s. And he's saying, you know, I got to change some shit up. I'm playing golf, I'm doing all that. But imagine from that perspective that he's talking about. He's gauging it at this level. Raf, what those runs you were telling me that you ran in the, was it 2.5 mile or the 2 mile?
Yeah, so we had a two mile time, and I always gauged on being I weigh about 215. So I always said to myself, I'm going to beat all the guys over 200. And I'm telling you, it's a big split between the little gazelles.
Oh, huge.
And the over 200 pounds. You know, and so by the time I could get my I don't remember the times, but I would pace on the little guys, just to know that if I could run with the little guys, because that's just the mechanics of it. When you get past the sprint, the little guys, less weight, it's a little easier. But I set myself, get myself in the game. I want to beat the big guys. That's my little goal, and just kind of roll that way. And the other things, aerosol, airborne, that sort of things. There's a lot of tricks in the Army. So you go to the schools and they tell you what the techniques are. Then they say, all right, we're going to take you through the course so you can know what you're doing. Well, it's a trick. If all you can do is that course, you're not going to make it, because they run you through the course ostensibly to say they're going to help you. Oh, we're going to show you the course. They run you through it, then they test you.
Yep.
And if you're the kind of person that needs to have things fair, needs to have equitable, you can't make it in the Army. You have to have the ability to believe. I don't care how they rig it. I don't care how they rig it. I'm going to do all I can. You know, I've been doing that my whole life, and it's become a habit. You know, and now, even now, but the joy. So I built my house up at the edge of Albuquerque, on the Lena. I look down there and I walk past all these $1 million houses, and I know these people didn't grow up in my neighborhood. And don't get me wrong, they're nice people, but they can't know the joy I know for climbing up to where they're at. And I remember my mom, the last house I had was a nice house. It was $500,000, and my mom was visiting. I asked her, she said, what's a nice house? And she said, what do you think this house cost, Mom? She said, It must have cost $100,000. That's the biggest number. That's the biggest number she could come up with. You know, if I told her now my house is $1 million, you know, it's incomprehensible to her.
$100,000 is $1 million.
Yeah, it's incomprehensible.
It's relative. It's relative, right?
Yeah, and even now, you know, now she's dementia. I don't talk to her as much, but she would tell me a long problem, and it would have so many components. At the end, it's a few $100 problem.
Yes.
So I said, Mom, just start there. Start there. It's a few $100 problem. It's $400 or $500. Doesn't matter. And so
Because you know one of the things that I learned, you know, when I trained with that CIA agent that I told you about, one of the things that I learned was he'd always say, take complexity to simplicity, take simplicity to complexity. And so at the time I was like, what the fuck does that mean, right? But when you listen to people, they're making something that's really simple complex. And then you got the guys who are making something complex simple because they're trying to take you. Right? So the guy comes in, he's talking these big financial plans and making them simple. All you do is put your money in here and you come out, this is going to be returned at 60, and then they're fucking everybody. Right? That's what social media is doing now with these get rich quick. That's why I created the Truth Podcast, and that's why we came and created Young Millionaires, so you're not being taken to the pain. I know what it is, I'm there. I've taken the step. And I think that when you take something so complex and it's like, it's going to take this, it's pretty simple. You know, and I think that one of the things that I work with the guys who I take under my wing, whether it's Carson or it's Ian Raphael, with who not a lot of knowledge coming out of them to a lot of knowledge, is saying, guys, we're going to look at something really simple. That's like I told Raph, we set a goal. He says, you know what I want? I want to be able to buy those 2 lots next to my house. We got the number and said, well, we got to close these many deals in order to get to this goal, right? Same thing with Carson, what his goal is. And so ultimately, if you can't set goals that are measurables, you're constantly going to be in life just like a hamster, because your psyche's protecting itself so that you don't fail, and that's the majority of people, right?
You know, it reminds me of something I posted. I think it was on my LinkedIn when the pandemic started. I said, you know, I'm a cybersecurity guy. I won't call myself an expert. I have some expertise. If I were a cyber criminal, I would use this time. I would assume that you want it quick and easy. So I would tell you, I'll solve your problems quick and easy. And I would send you an email. And I'd say, don't do your own research. Don't listen to the authorities. Just take this and click this easy fix solution. I would just hope that you were too lazy, that you just be driven by fear. And you click on that software so I can own you. And so I can make sure that your pandemic plague is worse. And there are people who think like that out there.
Yep.
Always trying to...
Scavengers.
Yeah.
Scavengers, right? And
But at the same time, you have to be able to to have the ability to think in most ruthless terms. Now, I didn't know what that meant in business. So Jack and I talk about that. We want to act benevolent, fair. We want to act that way. But I don't want to be blinded by people who act ruthlessly. See, historically, ruthless looks a lot like genius.
yeah.
So when people are ruthless, they can look pretty smart when they do the unthinkable, because that wasn't even in your equation. And it's a difficult thing. It's a dangerous thing. You can lose your way.
Okay, being that this is going to be in your field, and actually it was my son Orion that got me intrigued about it. About 2 o'clock this morning, I started watching the movie Snowden, and I hadn't watched it before. Okay, Mr. IT, security, cyber, all those different things. I couldn't decipher whether he's an enemy or a hero. I couldn't decipher from the movie. So I'm going to start looking up the documentaries, trying to read what transpired there from an IT point of view. Hero or enemy?
Woo,
Or is that not a question that could be answered in 5 minutes?
He's a bit of both. He exposed some things that American people were unaware of. Let me say, I'll say it right here. I as a so I'm a former federal agent. I have used cyber tools and things that most Americans don't know exist. I have operated in ways because some superior told me to look at something. And I often wouldn't know if that guy was a good guy or bad guy, or just run afoul of someone's politics. And that's the difficult thing about it. So you'd have to know Snowden's heart to know if he's a good guy or bad guy. But the fact that he exposed some things that the government's having a tough time explaining.
Because it violates the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution and the right to privacy, correct?
There's a lot of that.
The biggest issue is that it was brought to light by that. You know, so did he break the law by taking that classified information? Yes, but also you have a right to defend. You're sworn to defend the Constitution, and those government contractors swear the right to defend the Constitution. So that's where you have that confliction between, do I protect the Constitution or do I do what my superior tells me to do?
But I want to kind of add a little bit to that, John, right? And I think this is where, like, let's talk about moral character, right? What is it? This is where I go back to not taking the ego story, right? Because an ego, I could be like, well, I want to make my superior officers happy about life. Or what's my moral code, right? You know what's right and wrong. I think one of the situations when you look at that whole deal is, here's the opportunity when you're seeing people wanting government to solve their issues, right? That's freaking scary. Why do you want Big Brother solving your issue? Because then it creates a control. This is exactly what happened in Nazi Germany, right? Not a superpower. We want someone to solve us. Someone's coming in, doing stuff that was what I call normal, right? We're going to go use ruthless and say this is the guy who's going to get us there. And then it freaking backfired because he had an own agenda. That's what's scary about guys who have their own agenda but can actually sneak it into what it is. And so I like what Raphael said. Without us knowing anyone's heart, we're never going to know the agenda. Was it good or was it bad? Right?
You know, and there are always unintended so the news, I forget the station, they called me the other day to comment on whether I believe in contact tracing. So, do I believe in the concept? Sure. I said, we all know how cell phones tend to work and GPS, and it's not a big deal. You know where you are. You may know where your friends and loved ones are. And I don't have a problem with someone collecting data. But data in digital form can be extraordinarily dangerous. So if I had all the personal information of everyone in here, and I had all the phone numbers, and I threw them in a pile, I had all your addresses, and I threw them in a pile, and I had your medical records without your name on, and threw them in a pile, that data is not a big deal. But the minute I start to correlate that data and take data to intelligence, yes, and I can paint a picture, or I can view a picture, or I can paint a picture of you. So one of the things I learned early on as an investigator, you're always looking to compromise whoever you talk to. When I say compromise, you're not trying to get him to commit a crime, but I want to know if you're lying about something. I want to know who you are. And they probably day one at Flexi, they tell you, you're going to ruin lives. The day I knock on your door and I talk to you, your girlfriend, your spouse, or whatever, and I ask you something, and I ask them something, where were you? And you said something that I can see in their eyes is not true. I'm going to stick a pin in that because later I may want to come back to you and see what else I can press you on. So that's kind of how the system works. Every investigator out there is assessing who you are and is there anything I can leverage on that person just in case. As I look at this case, I want to come back and press you. And it may be something simple. Maybe you cheat at cards or golf, or you tell your spouse that you're going to work and you're hanging out with your buddies. Doesn't matter what it is. Yep. I'm seeking to leverage, compromise you somehow. So that's a system that most Americans don't understand they're up against.
I'm sure Clady's looking at you most of the time when he's talking.
But I think that contact tracing is kind of like, it's just an appeasement to say, oh, we're doing our part. But I mean, really, you have some hostess that's writing your name, but she doesn't verify that you're given a correct number. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I mean, I don't see where like sort of civil libertarians are, tripping over themselves because we're giving up our privacy. We gave up our privacy with the Patriot Act, and then allowing to data mine. I mean, what social media? Way bigger issues than a hostess writing down your name. and a phone number that may or may not be correct. You know?
Yeah, there are Americans every day going on vacation, telling the whole world that they're going to be out of the house. But even simpler, every year there's a PSA, public service announcement saying, don't leave your packages on your car seat at the mall during Christmas. We could go every year and collect packages off of car seats every year.
In the movie, they gave the example of being able to use the social media pages from contacts, a connection to connection to connection, where they can go live, and they use the Middle Eastern woman undressing through her computer. They use that, her webcam through her computer. Is that true, or did they embellish for the movie? They had Snowden with his own woman, where they were having relations, and him being distracted because the computer was open. And then the next day they show like, what do you call, like a piece of tape over the webcam and stuff like that.
I don't want to be dramatic, but
Was that dramatic for the movie? Or?
I don't want to be, but I still have a top secret clearance. I will say this: we can track whales under the ocean and the Arctic ice. So how hard would it be to track humans above ground? And there are cameras everywhere. And if you know where that person is, and you know where the cameras might be, or where they might have passed by it. You know, it's like they were saying that someone put a noose in Bubba Wallace's room. They'll find that person.
They'll find that.
You know,
I know that they can use your cell phone.
Yes.
And they can track your every step off your cell phone for the last, I don't know how long, your every step. Whether the phone is on or off, they can track every step of what you do.
Yeah.
And so when they, you know, and I don't want to sound naive, okay? But I don't take one side of the story just that, you know, I want to know what, you know, but when they in the movie talk about the deal with Google, the deal with Yahoo, the deal with Verizon first, I think they prefaced that they have the technology, and I think it was geared towards the NSA, that they have the, which is what I think Snowden's last employers were.
I want to step in real quick.
Let me one thing. So you said NSA. So let's say TLAs, because even that phrase might get you locked on by someone. So
Okay.
So three-letter agency.
And that's what they use.
Say
use
little tip from now on phone calls, and you want to talk about various agencies, say TLAs. That covers all of them.
Okay.
And that won't likely get
What
you
is that acronym?
three-letter agencies.
See, John's been into TNAs. You know, so he got a little confused.
You got a little confused. But I want to ask something to you, Coach.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you something from a network engineer. I haven't watched the movie, but with not enough information, yes, I can activate your camera on any device. That's 1,000%. So I'm going to run it through you really simple, right?
Please don't tell Mama that.
It's a footprint if you're a badass, right? So number one, your router, whether it's given, it will get a temporary IP address or you'll have a static address. If I can figure that out, then I know exactly where the location is at your home. If I can surpass the address from the router to the address to your computer, now I literally have access to the bedroom, so to say, right? I'm in your house. If I can use that information that I got from that IP address and now I can access the device, now I can access anything the device is linked to, so now I can turn things on and off, called remote access. So let me just quote you one thing. If your device is off, they can't track you. So that's whatever, I don't know if you got that from the movie. If your cell phone is off.
Oh, it doesn't ping off
It can't.
anything?
Battery has to be out of it.
What's that?
Battery has to be out of it.
So let me ask this.
So if the device is off, it doesn't, wherever you're at, it doesn't ping?
So if the device is not powered on, the device can't talk. So what happens is, that means your battery would die. So if I had a battery off and I turn it off, and you can run this test yourself, you don't believe it, shut your phone off. And if you wake up and your battery's dead, well then your phone was pinging when the battery's off, but that's gonna be highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the phone, in order for you to know that, it's gonna draw power because it's constantly pinging. So that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
The device has to be on, number one. But what I tell you this, these kind of mentalities you're talking about, that's why criminals are a lot smarter. I'm not going to give the footprint what you would do, but I'm going to tell you right thing, it's going to be a lot harder, right? And so one of the things that you'll see in life is you want to be smart. And so my grandfather once said this, and I got this, he says, look, only thieves look behind closed doors. Because a thief knows what he's going to do, right? And so when they always say, like when you're watching these movies, if you're going to be in cybersecurity, there's good engineers and there's bad engineers, right? If I go rogue one day and I go bad, it's going to be a bad day. You know what I'm trying to tell you? But the thing is,
There's an alert.
that's the level I'm talking about. So I always like to use Star Wars, right? When Carson's gonna laugh at this, I started watching Star Wars after we were talking. It's kind of like when Darth Vader became Darth Vader. He's really good, but once the Dark Force takes over him, he goes out to the other side. So ultimately, what we do know is this. In the private world, we have the ultimate technology versus the government world. The government world is pretty antiquated. So when they got these big players like Verizon and Yahoo and Google for money, I call it the universal equalizer, right? You know, water is the universal solvent, money is the universal equalizer. They got bought out pretty fierce, and so they gave the technology. But what you got to see is then you enact certain laws, like John's talking over there. So then if I have certain laws that can correlate with my technology, you're just plain fucked, right? Yeah. And so ultimately,
That's why the telecom companies don't right.
Yeah, but what we don't want to do, guys, is, and this is where it is not go off the basis of saying, well, someone has a 50 cal, so you know what, fuck it, there's nothing wrong with 22s, because they still can kill you. The 50 cal is going to make you turn to dust, the 22 is going to hurt you, still going to go down, right? So we gotta be aware of certain stuff that we don't want to give and just become so liberal that we're just giving all our information out.
Hey, let me say a few other cell phone myths, and like wrapping them in foil and all that sort of stuff. None of that stuff works. Turn it off. But even if you turn it off, if you're at one point on Earth, you turn it off at another point on Earth. If I was an investigator,
yes,
I could still figure out where you were. So you know, and then I would find there are some activities that if you do them, shows the malice of forethought. Yes. It makes you look more like a criminal.
Yes.
Than if you just try to play it straight.
So I want to show you this image that Zuckerberg, he had somebody took a selfie of something, and then the internet had kind of picked up on things that they saw in the background on his computer screen. On his computer over there, he has tape over his webcam, he has tape over his microphone, and then he uses Thunderbird for his email client. So here's this person that highest level of web developer. He knows that.
Sure.
We're,
And there are times where you'll hear some TLA saying that they're trying to get some outside expert to crack some software to look into something. Usually what they're saying is, so it's something they can use in trial. They can get in it. Yeah. They can get into anything. But more than that, people just give away so much information.
Yes. Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Just give it away. So it's not.
No doubt. I mean, I've seen that where parents are like, they're showing their birth certificate or their of their kids, and they divulge when their date of birth. So literally, people can just go back through your timeline, and you've given up your maiden name. You've probably done all those things.
Sure. Oh yeah. Getting receipts, using credit cards, all that sort of stuff. So, but it's okay to be on the grid, in the game. I would say self-monitoring is a big deal, and it's pretty easy to get some software or to have some subscription to just check your online profile. When I say online profile, maybe something like a LifeLock, or those sort of things, or what's the other one? Or just checking your own credit thing to see who's looking at you.
Even like Discover Card or American Express does it for free.
Yeah.
Does it very well. Because the one thing that you really want to check is like a wrap but the one thing you don't want to end up on, and you got to make sure your identity is not sold on the dark web. And so these companies are good at that, to see that, because you could be conduited and you're just taken to the paint because they're using you in the dark web, and all of a sudden you're over here at the grill getting a burger and they're using your shit and they think it looks bad for you. So that's just all about, it's again, don't give your information out, don't send certain stuff. I mean, you got to use common sense.
Yeah.
But if I was profiling somebody, I can tell immediately what, based on social media, what's up, right?
So I ran the largest, at that time, the largest cyber warfare game in the country. And we did that at PEC, and we did a similar thing out at Quantico, Virginia. And what we did was invited all these industry experts to bring their best, and we simulated those systems. And like I call young men, little knuckleheads, they're little knucklehead women also. They were able to break into everything, literally everything. I've never seen a construct that when you dedicated people to doing it, they couldn't break into it. What you're left with is how long they're in it, and if it's monitored in real time.
Yes.
That's all. And all of you out there listening, if you want to know, well, how do you handle cybersecurity? You need to get some real-time monitoring. Fortunately, I know where you can get that.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's like even mall cops, and I don't want to disparage mall cops, but the fact that they're there in uniform prevent a lot of crime, regardless of lacking investigative skills or whatever, just their presence. The same thing with monitoring. And one of the things I noticed, and we'll talk a little bit of cybersecurity, say the Chinese, and they don't mind putting a logic bomb into a system and waiting for years for something to be activated. And so there's Trojan, there's logic bombs, there's just the other day, DDoS, the other day, distributed denial of services, a lot of activities. Some speculate that it's China trying to push and make sure they see what's going on in North Korea and seeing if their command and control could be compromised. And we all suffer from that. And then there was the border gate protocol issue. So if you look at the whole world of internet traffic, and there are all these routes, going down and being rebuilt, it's all dynamic. If you corrupt enough of it, where enough of it is being rebuilt, I'll bet you most people out there experience some problems with their telephone the last few days. See, that's so that's the kind of thing that Jack and I, we're hearing and seeing and thinking like that. Now, if we got you and we're working with you, you're covered, because we've got you set up for a good data backup. We're monitoring your system, and it's not that you won't get compromised. As soon as we see the compromise, we shut it down.
Or we teach you how to put the stuff. It's like the story of, fortifying your infrastructure. So one of the things, there's a study. I got a pretty badass security group, right, that works at Harmonics. A lot of ex-law enforcement, a lot of ex-special forces. And one of the things that they see is this, right? And they did this with jewelers. And so I'm not going to mention the name. This guy's out of state, but he doesn't hold his jewelry in his office because it looks like it's going to be constructed, the bars, all that. So that's where they attempt. His jewelry is hidden somewhere else that nobody would ever know, in plain sight. And so ultimately what you start to discover is you don't want to set up the one steel door and the rest of the facility doesn't have a steel door, because what I'm telling you is that I have something important behind that steel door. The steel door has to go behind the regular door so that it looks normal, right? And banks did this. If you notice, banks don't have the big bars on the outside. So now it just took that whole psychological piece of it, and then you put the guards, people watching, and that's kind of like what you do in technology. Is you're really taking a common sense approach to everything. But at the end of the day, if you got very important data, write it down.
Let's talk about real quick, and you guys can educate me on the big game, elections. Okay? How, and they do it through social media, where they compromise our elections. Obviously, the Russians were heavily involved in our last elections, right? How do we defend those things? Because now it's part of campaigns, it's part of, hey,
I'm gonna give my spot, Ralph, and then you jump in with the thing. I'm gonna give it to you simple. I'm gonna do technology. It's about common sense. So let me just tell you something, right? If I'm sitting out here and I go to that menu and I don't even look at the menu and I sit at a table and Phil comes in and he's gonna feed me whatever he wants, and he fucking throws cat foot and he mixes it with ground beef and he mixes it. I'm like, shit, this thing's good. I don't know what's behind it. No one can control anything that you don't understand. So this is the thing. If I'm sitting here and I personally do my study. I'm gonna go John level here, right? And I understand the policies, and I understand the president. I know what this is, and I go A, B, C, and D, and I actually have empirical data. I don't care who controls the internet or what the influence is. It's not going to affect you. It's the people that want to be led. And I'm going to give you an example. This is crazy, and I'm a huge supporter of President Obama for what he said. But they were reading some of the policies that he put in place. And so just get a whole bunch of people that go through this thing and they put the policies in place and bam, 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 bam. And they're like, what do you think about that president? That sounds just like Trump, that son of a gun, he goes down. And then they go, no, that was actually President Obama. And then the people step back and say, oh, someone must have coerced him, or there was some power, this, that. And so what I'm saying is that ultimately, if you're influenced by social media or just what I call the icing, but you don't know how to bake your cake, well, then you deserve to get hoaxed. So that shit shouldn't even matter. But what they were matter is saying all the lemmings ran to the lake or over the cliff because the Russians did a certain thing. The Russians that affect me, no matter what the hell they do on social media, because I'm going to know policy then. And it's education. That's where it goes back to education. If you educate the kids and you educate the people and you tell them about the stuff that matters, then how can they pull a wool over your eyes?
Well, that's one of the reasons that there's that fear of lots of young people in minorities getting the vote, because they're not, you can't on their back and tell them it's raining.
You can say this.
Yeah. Well, I still have to be a civic leader, but the social media has some effect. But at the end of the day, if people vote and you see some statistical problem, it's going to be fairly obvious. If suddenly New Mexico turned red, that just wouldn't make sense. There are some things at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers, but it's not going to make sense. And I think that's going to be those red flags. And
are the red flags of influence?
Some.
Because how can they? I mean, we've seen over the last 2 years Senate hearings. This dominates media coverage and all these different things. Is it a facade or is it real?
Look, we Americans, we like to be distracted, and we like to click on things and be entertained and that sort of stuff. And that usually works. But society is awake now. This George Floyd thing has awakened people.
It's a new world.
And people wide awake, eyes open, will see. They will see. Look, I will tell you, and I can't represent the whole African American community, but they simply didn't participate as much as they could have. And that goes for the Hispanic community also. The change we saw is a part of that lack of participation.
That's exactly what we've said. What we've said was Trump was able to win, called the electoral, but because people didn't vote.
Yes.
And he won by the plaque on his teeth.
Yeah.
He lost the general election, but I believe now, like, for example, I was in Oklahoma this past weekend. He was in Oklahoma this past weekend. 7,000 people in a 19,000 seat arena. They had him scheduled to talk to the overflow crowd after his performance, and there was not a person in the overflow crowd. Man, I'm going, is this a trend? Because what's happening, I believe, and what do I know? I'm not you guys are pros. I'm saying, did he start getting people that didn't vote in 16 by saying, we've got to vote, and if they do, does Biden have a genuine chance?
Look, I'm gonna add a little bit to this, Coach, okay? Look, I was with Brian Colon. We were in Washington, D.C. We were at APAC. And I don't know shit about politics at their level, right? And I'm sitting with Brian. I'm sitting with Sarah Maestas Barnes. I'm sitting with some pretty heavy hitters. And we're in there, and I'm even with Richardson. And so we sit down, and all the candidates come up, right, to speak. So I got to see, like, Hillary Clinton and all that. And it was funny because we're in the front. There's these older Jewish people, right, that are, like, with their canes. Everyone came out, they spoke, Trump came out, and they all stood up and they were clapping. And I remember telling Brian, I looked over at him and Sarah Maestas Barnes, and said, that's our next president. Oh, you're crazy, I know the Republican Party. And I said, this is what's going on. I said, you literally, when I looked across this arena, here we are at APAC, and the whole arena stood up for him. And this is what it was. And I don't know how this is going to change, but this is what it is. The American people were so fed up with traditional politicians in power in this. Where Trump became sexy is when he told the majority leader party, the party speaker of the House, to go pound sand, and that he didn't need their love, that the people were going to put him in power, and he won, right? And he became the incumbent to go in for the election. People want change. We don't know what it is, and so we just jump on the wagon and say, he's the change, holy shit, he's not going to be controlled. And then with people's opinions, whether it's good, bad, or sucks, or where he's at, what we got to be able to do is take the statistical data, and say, where are we in unemployment? Where are we with this? Where are we with that? And where it's done. The one piece that I don't agree with the president, and both being ex-military, and especially rap thing, is, you're trained and taught, you don't have an opinion. He's the commander-in-chief, period, right? But the one thing that I can stand and say is this. What I didn't like is that he ignited the hate in the whole racial deal. And it all started off with building the wall.
Office.
And,
Office.
against the Mexican people. But let me just finish. Let me finish up, Coach. You know what I mean? And when you see that, what should have happened, and I like what Puff Daddy said. Puffy said it best on Instagram, and I laughed my ass off. He says, you're going to have to work for our vote. And so the people are coming out now saying, you're going to have to work for a vote. Just because you're against Trump or whatever, doesn't mean, what are you going to do for the black community? And this is what I got to tell people in New Mexico. What are you going to do for the Hispanic and Native community? And what's in essence going to happen in the black community? But wrap it up, what are you going to do for the minority community to better where you're at today? If you can ask yourself that question and then forge the answer, then the answer is there for you. Simple math. Simple addition, simple subtraction, instead of looking at it as the equation. So ultimately, when you're sitting here and you vote the next time, and I'm not going to say anything, but I'm a Native American, and I'm voting the next time, whether it's the next senator or governor, and I say, when they were in office, how did I get affected? Positive or negative? Positive or negative should be my answer. Right?
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Let me add, I can tell you, there's always, and I remember back to the Obama election, and I will tell you about my people. When they get motivated and inspired, all the shenanigans with polling places, it won't work. Trust me, if you had a restaurant here and you sold a food type they only ate in Iceland that black people would normally go, you put a sign out and say black people can't eat here, they will fill your parking lot. Trust me on this. Trust me on that. So all these shenanigans is as wrong-headed as it can get. You saw those lines of people waiting in Florida that time when the President Obama ran, and it was amazing. So as far as the African American community, I am excited about the energy, the focus, and there's no amount of Russian propaganda that's going to work.
I think people that don't really understand, Raphael, when you talk about voter ID registration and all the different disenfranchisement, they don't understand that stuff's real.
It is real.
That, we live in Albuquerque, we don't understand that there's certain rural places where we can't, like, for example, how about Washington, D.C.? Why won't the Republicans allow Washington, D.C. statehood? Right?
Because they won't let anybody become a state because they don't want to give up 2 cents.
Because why? Tell them why they won't give Washington, D.C.
Because it'll unbalance the electoral college. Same thing. Reason why they keep doing that to Puerto Rico. It'll unbalance the electoral college. I mean, we're still seeing 150 years later, post-Civil War, even prior to the Civil War, to where, okay, do we let a new state in because are they going to be a free state or are they going to be a slave state? That fight is still exists today. You know, that's why they don't give DC the opportunity to be a state, because they don't want to give them 2 senators. I mean, you look at you could add up 14 states, and that equals Orange County.
Yeah.
And Orange County has 2 senators because the whole state, and there are 14 states that have 28 senators.
Yes.
So you tell me that this is the
Sure.
whole system is
Yeah,
rigged.
yeah. I mean, New
And I
York's.
saw it with DC.
Yeah.
I saw where they were talking about this weekend on Mars show, taxation without representation. DC, which pays more federal tax than 14 states out there, taxation without representation. I think that's what excites me about today, 2020, the BLM movement. I don't look at it like, what is the right say about the BLM movement? Oh, it's a racist thing. It's this. No, BLM represents me. I'm not going out there going, what about Native American lives matter? No, BLM covers us too.
Yes.
The movement covers us too.
Yes.
That's why I said this on the show last week. I'm so proud of the young people out there.
Yes.
I am so proud. And the one thing you had talked about earlier about Chappelle's,
846.
846, the thing that he said that moved me the most when he said, Don Lemon called me out, man, the streets are talking. They don't need me.
Exactly. I kept my mouth shut.
The streets are talking.
Right.
And the streets are talking. They
Yeah.
said it here. The streets are talking here in Albuquerque.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know, the streets are talking. And it seems like we're listening a little bit more than ever. I remember the 68 riots. I said this last week on the show. I was in kindergarten. I remember my school being locked down with the riots in North back east. Okay, my school was locked down. I remember that. Obviously, the King riots. Obviously, every there afterwards. And I remember the outrage over all of them. But it's different this time. It's different. And I'm hoping that what we can do, we need radical reform, obviously, in law enforcement. Would you agree that we need radical reform? Well, here's what I'm hoping. I saw an interview with George Will, and George Will, I loved that the generals came out against Trump. Love it that the generals came out against him. I love it that Cohen, what he said last week on, I don't know if it was Meet the Press or whatever, what he had said, loved what he said. George Will now has come out in his op-ed and said, now we need to hold the Republicans.
Who's a conservative politics?
Yes, who is a conservative. We need to hold those Republican congressmen, senators who have allowed Trump to be Trump. We need to hold them accountable for what they've allowed him to do. The change that I see coming is it possible in this election, has BLM and what's transpired with all our young brothers and sisters who have been, brutalized. Is it possible, House, Senate, White House? Is it possible this election?
I don't know, but that's kind of how it happened in Obama's first term, right?
First
He swept.
years.
Yeah, a leader like that. I was at the inauguration, and first thing was watching a few of the celebrities by themselves. You never see them by themselves because you can only get one ticket. And so I was just right behind the edge of the line there. And they would walk in. I think I saw Denzel Washington. You almost don't see them walking by themselves because you couldn't have your entourage. Yeah, it was amazing. But it swept the nation.
Do you remember when they put Clarence Thomas on the big screen? What they do?
Boo.
Boo. That's one of my favorite.
And that final hey goodbye for the last administration.
Yeah.
But here's my personal embarrassment. When he started running, I was like the other practical blacks. Let's not do it now. Let's just get Hillary and let's just move the ball. And I was wrong. And I analyzed, where did my hope go? I personally liked the guy. Why wasn't that enough? Why did I have all this other calculus in my head of, okay, I'm practical black person, and that means black guy can't get elected, so let's get Hillary or someone close. I forget who was the biggest contender, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
I learned that I learned to have less hope. I learned to believe so little was possible.
But you know what the bottom line is? You know, when you go to a car lot, right? You go to a regular car lot, you got a selection. And so you got the not so super cars to choose from. That's how I look at the fucking elections. You want my honest opinion, right? We're going to the car lot and there's not a lot of selection, there's not a mileage on these cars. And so we have to wake up from here that the freaking politicians that we have, they're not going to make a change, the ones we got there. Those 70-year-olds and all those guys that don't give a crap. We have to make the change here and start getting these guys out of here. Because come on, let's make it straight. I mean, you know what? I'm going to say this, hopefully I'm not become a target of my life here, but you're just getting which evil's better. It's not like you're getting some monstrous change. I mean, so ultimately you have to understand, that's one thing, you know, people ask me and say, Jack, why did you choose, or what party or what you've been in life? And I said, you know what I choose? I said, I don't choose for me. I choose for my people. I choose for the people back home that can't make it happen because they have a disability or they don't have that ability. I don't give a shit. I'm going to make the change. I'm going to make the moves that I need to make to better myself. But I have to care about that. And so when people are talking about, I want to see all these social programs go off and all that, I'm like, and it's always the broke people. It makes me laugh the most. It's always the broke people, right? Because if they turn the water faucet on, they're going to be dying. I'm still be floating on my boat looking at them like, geez, you're down there. But when you're really in leadership position, I don't vote for Jack. What's going to benefit Jack? I'm voting for all those people that are in my community that I know that need that fair shot, that need those food stamps to make it, grandmas, that need that stuff to be able to heat their houses because it's cold. I vote based on the people, not on my needs.
Well, and you see a lot of statistical models showing where the population really is, yet few politicians controlled by the rich do something different. Gun control is one of them. If you're not competent mentally, then you probably shouldn't have a dangerous weapon. And that's just kind of common sense. There's a whole boatload of things that you can't do. Yes. So and the public agrees with that. Even NRA members agree with that. Yet the politicians won't even vote on it because they don't want to be exposed. And that's what drives me nuts.
Did we see something this weekend that maybe was forthcoming? Did we see something? What was your opinion on both rulings of a conservative Supreme Court?
Oh, no. Last week in the Supreme Court, you had two instances. The first one was, one of them was having to do with
DACA was the first one.
DACA.
And LGBT rights.
And LGBT rights, which you had instances where Gorsuch and one of them who was a Trump appointed, and then John Roberts, he's the Chief Justice that George W. Bush appointed. So they definitely crossed party lines and they voted for sensible things. And that's the whole point of the Supreme Court, is that it's supposed to self-correct itself.
Yeah.
I mean, at one time, Plessy versus Ferguson was the law of the land that allowed segregation. Or you looked at the Dred Scott decision that said slavery was legal. But then eventually, that's hopefully the beauty of our Constitution, is that it corrects itself.
Sure.
And Brown versus the Board of Education replaces Plessy versus Ferguson. 10 years ago, 30 states had on the ballot to protect the sanctity of marriage, and now gay marriage is legal throughout the land. So, I mean, we evolve at a slow snail's pace, but it's a frustrating thing, but it's also a good thing too, because if not, you have somebody who's crazy that comes in there that can completely say, the sky's red now, or something ridiculous. They can, so that's what the purpose of the Constitution is, to safeguard us really from ourselves.
And you're right, and so I guess it falls on all of us who, say, I'm not from the LGBT community, so why should I care? And that's the trap, right? If you don't care about their civil rights.
With you, when I heard about that, I was so happy for John here. I had a cocktail for him. I had a cocktail for him.
Yeah.
Everybody love everybody.
And it's easy, and it's an old child's story where they talked about which one said it? Well, I'm not that, and I'm not this. And then when they came for them, which one? I forget the little child story about the bat and I'm not a bird and all that sort of thing. But it's the same thing that I don't know if I've cared enough about the LGBT community's rights. I don't know if I've cared enough. What have I done to help that? I don't know if I cared enough about DACA. I worked that border. My first missions in New Mexico, I worked on that border with the military. And I remember flying helicopters along the border at night. And, a kid from North Carolina, they tell you the border. And then, the first time you see a group of people is women and children. And they're not the banditos that you had in your head. And like those crazy guys from up north that got their guns and came down to the border. The what?
Minutemen.
Yeah. I don't know how you could look at that, see the condition, see the situation, and not be moved with your heart. How can you look at children in cages and not be moved by that?
As far as I'm concerned, you're all immigrants.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
And well, his descendants aren't immigrants; they were forced here. So,
Yeah.
so to call them, no, I agree with you.
we love, listen, Raphael, my goodness, you've got to come back. I mean, we can do hours with you.
My pleasure.
We haven't even gotten to half of what I wanted to discuss. I'm sure we didn't fulfill the general's itinerary of what we can discuss.
This is my coming out party. Jack's kind of introducing me to the business community and kind of bringing me out.
Right.
But you know what?
Closing, Jack?
I'm introducing.
Do you
Well,
have anything?
I got a few things I'm gonna read here from the closing, okay? And I want you guys to write this shit down because this is gonna really hit there. And it just talks about kind of rapping, but it's a few things that I just took down, right? And so I want to say like this. You don't become overweight by overeating once. You don't have a bad credit by missing your payment once. You don't have relationship issues by not communicating once. You don't live paycheck to paycheck by overspending once. Your actions become your habits become your reality. That's exactly what we talked about today.
Yep.
And so when you put it again, it's about what you're gonna do and practice every day because your habits become your reality. And I wanted to just kind of put this here, right?
Awesome.
5 ethics of life, real simple shit, right? Listen before you speak. Earn before you spend. Think before you write. Try before you quit. Live before you die.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack.
So you see what I'm trying to say? So in closing, what I want to leave with you guys is I hope you wrote those things down, but ultimately is this, and I've used this. Let's learn to look at everybody from a humanistic perspective, and let's just be kind. And if you live with a kind mind, a kind heart, you'll have a kind action. So that's what my focus is, just be kind.
And my focus in closing out is this side of the bar's got to get them cool shades. Like they have the coolest shades. I think they have those shades because they know stuff we don't. You know what I'm saying? So until next week,
They have the Tony Stark shades. They have technology right in them right now.
right?
Yeah.
Raphael, thanks for being here. Man.
It is
It's an honor to have you here, man.
It is my pleasure. Great meeting you guys. You both added some things to it, Coach. There is just no greater calling than to shape and mold people and just get the best out of them.
You know, the ultimate,
God bless you.
The ultimate compliment you can give anybody is being an agent of change. And Raphael, you're my new friend.
Thank you.
That's an agent of change, and Jack is amazing because he's bringing people to the table that, man, we are going to build an army that won't be defeated.
I'll tell you something was eerie. I have an icon that represents my company, and throughout the time and space, Jack has that same icon, the Spartan.
Yep.
And it was an eerie connection, but it's just one of those little things. And when you look and read the tea leaves and the signs, and some things come together.
Right, no doubt. Until we see you next week, General.
We're out.
All right.